Hello chess friends, this is FIDE Master Valeri Lilov, and today I would like to continue talking about the saga with the chess cheating scandal that started last year, and yet it continued even till today. I'd like to give some more information as well as some more light on the most recent events that took place and how I believe that the chess masters managed to somewhat deal with the problem. So most of you will be interested to hear what actually happened. Before I get started with that, I'd like to make a short recap to what really happened initially and how did it come to this. In the late weeks of 2012, there was a tournament, a very strong open tournament in the Croatian town of Zadar, where a reasonably mediocre player, rated only 2200, managed to practically destroy strong and experienced grandmasters with 2600. That's what really happened. But the most important about this wasn't so much that he defeated the grandmasters, it was about the way how he defeated the grandmasters, and that in almost all of the games, except of the ones that actually it's known he wasn't using any help, any assisting help, because there was a problem that maybe he would have been searched or whatever. Actually, in all his games, he used a computer assistance to help him, as he was actually playing 99% of his moves following the computer. Now we exclude the openings and we exclude any glitches that happened. I mean, this is very important. That's what I actually mentioned in my previous videos. Then we had some continuation to that, and it's important to mention that there was nevertheless a tournament where basically this player could not cheat, and that was probably because he did not want to cheat, or essentially it was because he wasn't able to. We don't know that. Nevertheless, given the latest article on chessbase.com that was published about some rapid tournament where the same player, Borislav Ivanov, managed to defeat many strong grandmasters with an amazing score of 8 out of 9, only 2 quick draws. Basically, we have to go back and see what really happened in this tournament where he wasn't allowed, or probably he just didn't want to cheat. That happened in February, and I've covered that in my previous videos. So we have a tournament where basically his rating of 2342 was completely unrealistic, as his rating performance was 400 points lower, and you can just see that he was actually losing versus a 1900 player. He did not manage to defeat two players around 2000, and he lost versus some other players around 2000. I was a witness because I was actually playing in that tournament myself, and I have to say that in this tournament he was just playing very, very weak. There was no computer moves out there. There was just bad play, and I know that this is how that player is going for. Now, some people will say, of course, but Valeri, this is fine what you're saying, but here it is. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he wasn't just playing up to par. That's fine. Now, it can happen to anyone. But you see, it repeated in a few tournaments. This guy was constantly unable to win players who were above 2000, or to actually achieve good and winning positions against them. And the most amazing thing is how it all started. Now, the Zadar tournament was not the first one when an assistance has been used. If we look at the statistics, and if you actually check my other videos, you will see that there was a tournament, an open tournament in my country, in Bulgaria. That was the Tetevan Open, where he also played and he performed very poorly, meaning he just, he had a very mediocre result. I think something like 3 or 4 points. And then a week later, just 1 week later, he defeated some master opponents with an extraordinary result of 8 consecutive victories. It was like in 1 week gap. So I don't think that this is all coincidence, but even if some people say, I believe that the major thing that is practically impossible for any type of players is to follow the computer moves in such a consistent manner. You see, here we're not talking about just a coincidence. We are talking about every single game following 99% of what the top chess engine is suggesting. And we are even talking about blitz games. I'm actually going to tell you about this. You see, this is impossible for anyone to do. And it doesn't matter who he is, whether it's the world champion, whether it's Carlsen or anyone. We cannot see such a high match with a computer program to no one of the great chess players in the world. But now let's talk about what happened recently. So there were some articles in chessbase.com, and there were some videos, there were some comments, and basically, many people said that they are completely certain that this guy was cheating. Others said, okay, especially the more beginner or amateur players used to say, I'm not convinced. I mean, obviously, the high percentage of computer moves cannot be a physical proof for a process or whatever, for a ban of this player. Nevertheless, I would like to give a little more information about what happened lately, and then how he was really caught, and how he was actually made to give himself away as the cheating scheme becomes clear. So let's talk about the most recent event. After the Plovdiv tournament, where he scored with a very bad performance of 1900, which I believe was more of a tournament where he didn't want to cheat, just because he wanted to have a bad tournament, so to speak, in order to show people that, okay, he's not playing perfect and every time, and he was just playing himself. That's why he scored so badly. There was a tournament that actually happened in April, a blitz tournament, 10 minutes plus 5 seconds per move, I believe, where many strong players actually participated. There were 4 grandmasters, as far as I can see. You can see some of the best players in our country, 4 grandmasters. Then we have 4 international masters, some FIDE masters, national masters, and so on. And I mean, if you look at the ranking list after round 9, which is very interesting, the final cross table, you're going to find out something quite amazing. Essentially, our guy, Borislav Ivanov, has taken 7.5 points out of 9. Now, this is a good score. But if you look more carefully, you'll find out that he actually defeated almost everyone in this tournament. So we've got only 1 loss and 1 draw. So you're probably going to say, okay, that's fine, Valeri. These are not really high-rated players. I mean, especially except of these 24, 26, 2500 that he played. So, okay, well, he has a loss too and a draw. True, there is a loss and there is a draw, but let's talk about them. The loss happened in the final round of a tournament in which, basically, as I'm going to show you the game later, what turned out is that Ivanov received a completely winning position. And by having a few minutes on his clock, he made a terrible blunder, which was so close. I mean, the move that he could do was too elementary, and yet instead of doing it, he made another one that loses in 1 move out of a completely winning position. I believe that there was some sort of a glitch with the software, or whatever had happened. Probably he did not have time to transmit the move, which resulted in that mistake. Nevertheless, the game was lost out of a completely winning position, just because of 1 single blunder at a moment where he was reasonably short in time, and possibly a transmission was impossible. There was 1 player, nevertheless, who made the first step towards the possibility to achieve a win against that cheating scheme, and that was Grandmaster Grigorov, who did not show up on the game. He did not show up on 8th round, although at that moment in the tournament he was actually with a perfect score of 6.5 out of 7. So this is a very strong grandmaster who I personally know, and he's very honest as well. And basically he decided not to play the game. Now, I don't believe that it would have made any difference if he played, because he would have lost it anyway. Nevertheless, he did not play, so he was forfeited. And then the last game there was a quick draw on round 9, so that this guy can actually take the first place. Now, what was most amazing about this tournament, okay, everybody can say that was blitz, but I mean, what was most amazing was a game that he played versus Grandmaster Georgiev, who a few weeks later became undisputedly the Bulgarian chess champion. I think he had some amazing score, and he defeated most of the other grandmasters. So he was really in a good shape, so to speak, before that tournament. But what happened is that in the game against Borislav Ivanov, in that particular game, which I'm going to show you, essentially, Georgiev has been outplayed by an absolute computer type play. Now, anyone can suggest that, okay, most likely there was some luck, and in all of his games he was actually playing all by the computer type of moves. But trust me, as an experienced blitz player, I can tell you that no human brain, no matter how good and how talented it is, one cannot play as strong and as computer type just because there is not enough time. 10 minutes are not enough so you can follow 99% of the computer moves on the game. It's practically impossible. So that's what happened. There was some very big discussions, and many people were just completely furious about what happened because it was an obvious cheating. There are certain things that are practically impossible, and they happen. So this tournament was over, and there were some rumors that Ivanov may participate in the first big open in the old capital of our country, a very well organized open tournament that was going to be the first of its kind, and that was the open tournament in Veliko from the 1st to the 6th of May this year. First open old capital, and there were many strong players who signed up initially to play on that tournament. What was nice is that the organizers put a very nice message out there. Only the chess players who have been approved by the organizers and have paid for the participation fee are allowed to take part in the tournament. So initially their idea was not to allow Borislav Ivanov to participate in that tournament, and that seemed like the ultimate solution. There were other ideas, how he can be caught and plays, and how they can eventually strip search him or whatever, but obviously that has some law issues, and I like to say that because many players have been speculating with the idea, can they strip search him, ask a doctor. Now, if you're aware of the laws in our country, it's becoming very difficult to do that, simply because he may not want to do this. He may not, for example, if there is a doctor, if there is a special strip search that he doesn't want to commit to, then he may just say, I don't want to. Now, in the Zadar tournament, back in 2012, there was a strip search in round 8, the one before the last, and he was warned before that there will be a strip search, just because otherwise nobody can search him. You see, he's got his civil rights. So basically, he allowed them to make a strip search. But obviously, in that game, since he lost pretty quickly, he was not wearing any devices. In our country, there is no possibility for a strip search before he's worn, at least a little bit before that, which is of course completely necessary so that he can just take off his devices before he goes to the game and plays on himself. He'll lose, but they'll find nothing in him. So what happened in that tournament? He didn't participate, right? Well, there have been some rumors that there was a certain pressure on the organizers, and some of the organizers, that basically he's allowed to play in that tournament. And of course, I don't know how true is that, because there were just rumors. Some grandmasters have told me that. Nevertheless, in the end, he was playing, and that's amazing actually, because as soon as his name was published in the website tournament and other websites, essentially many of the strongest players who've been signed to play in that tournament just went off. Before that, I'd like to mention one important fact, that before that open tournament, there was a very valuable document that was signed by most of the strongest players in our country, that in any kind of tournament where this chess player Ivanov is participating, all these players from that list who signed will not be playing there. So the idea is that the organizers can choose whether they want the strong players to go or probably play, or perhaps they wish that Ivanov actually plays in this tournament. So that's the reason why many of the strong players who initially signed up to play in that tournament just completely were removed from the list as soon as his name was published on the participants list. So what we have is an interesting tournament with only a few players that were going to play out there, a few strong players from all these grandmasters and others who were initially signed to play, and Ivanov amongst the others who remain. Here's the list. You can see there were some international masters, but obviously only 2 GMs, so the tournament wasn't supposed to be as strong as it was initially going to be if he didn't participate in the tournament at all. So where is his name? Here it is. He's playing again. Now, what was quite amazing is that if we look at the results of the tournament, we're going to find out that in the first game he made a draw against a player who is 61st in the list with a rating of 1800, a girl whom he just exchanged all the pieces and gave an easy draw. The interesting thing about that game, nevertheless, was that he made a draw by just exchanging pieces, and that is importantly happening in all the other reports that I've made, especially the last one. If some of you want to see the last report that I've made, you can click on the text below the video, and there are links to the previous reports that I've made. So there is a setting of the computer program that allows the computer program to simply exchange as many pieces as possible. That's how the game is definitely a draw, and the reason why that was made was just to see what's the situation like. So it's of course stupid to make a draw against an 1800 player, but he obviously didn't want to win the first game, so he doesn't cause any immediate suspicion. So the first game was a simple draw versus an 1800 player. Now if you look more carefully next, you're going to find out that every single one of the next games he was winning. He won against some 1500 player. This wasn't important, as a matter of fact. Then we have a win versus a 2185 Polish player. And then we've got the fourth round, which was really interesting. In the fourth round, with 2.5 out of 3, he was supposed to play against one of our strongest and most experienced international masters Sashnikov, who had to play with white against Borislav. And what's really amazing is that before that tournament, he was one of the players who actually signed the list that he's not going to be playing anywhere where Ivanov will be participating. Yet he was participating on that tournament, but there was something else that became clear afterwards. Some people from that list also participated on that tournament, international masters and so, but they simply didn't play against him. When they were paired to play against Borislav, they just didn't show up. And that made sense, because in that case, he's just getting a forfeit. Borislav doesn't get any sort of rating points, and although that doesn't stop him from being first in the tournament, at least that is sort of a way to boycott his playing and show that these players are not comfortable with Ivanov participating, and actually just not participating, but just taking away these games in an unfair way. In the next round, round 4 was forfeited obviously by the international masters, so Borislav took a full point with a bye. On the next round, there was a grandmaster from Macedonia who actually knew that his opponent was cheating, but still decided to play, and naturally he lost the game. He lost it in a very bad manner. I mean, Borislav just destroyed him, and essentially we see on the round 6, when he was going to play with one of the other people who signed that list to not play with him or not participate in tournaments where he's going to be, also didn't show up for his game. Back at that time in round 6, everybody was thinking that Ivanov is going to just go on and take the first place, so everybody else will be fighting for a second place, until later on we were able to look at the actual rules of the tournament, and we noticed a very interesting clause. What was said there is that if a player has more than 3 wins with a bye, what happens is that he cannot actually take any prize. He cannot fight for the prizes. And that's really smart, because you see, this gives the chess players an opportunity to show if they respect Ivanov's way of cheating so much so that they can give him a prize, or simply they're not going to show up in 3 games, after which he loses the possibility to be first in the tournament or take any prize at all. So we got 2 actual buyers in that tournament, 2 people who decided to boycott him and not show up on their game, so that basically he takes 2 buys. And there was only one more game that he should not play. He should have taken a buy, so that basically he's out of the ratings. Now we have round 7, 8, 9, 3 more rounds before the final standings. On round 7, he was playing against one of the strongest international masters from Italy, the young Axel Rombaldoni, who on his Facebook announced that he's preparing against Houdini, and he'd like to actually see his opponent's face and really get convinced that he's cheating. That actually happened, and he was destroyed in the game in a very brutal way. I'm actually going to upload some links to the games, and I'm going to show some games myself later on after that, just to show what happened. I mean, those games were really ruthless. We see a total Andrew play, and most of all, what we see out there is that there was no single deviation. I'm going to explain why is that, but there is no even one single deviation from what the computer is suggesting on the first place. So Rommel only lost, and on round 8, Ivanov was playing against a friend of his, who he made an easy draw against. That was a really quick draw, and after the first, I believe, half an hour, they agreed to a draw without any practical play. So that was a friendly draw. So we had round 9. Now, what's interesting about round 8 is that basically on round 9, it was supposed that Ivanov could possibly offer some sort of payment, some sort of a bribe to his next opponent, just so that he can show up and Ivanov can take the prize. Nevertheless, the game on the second board was really interesting, and it was played between Nikolov, International Master Nikolov, who earlier did not show up for this game against Borislav, and a very talented player from Turnovo, Kutov, who's actually also a good friend of mine. So they played a very fighting game, as they know that they can both play against Borislav in case of a win. It was really fighting game, and Nikolov actually won that one. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, but he won the game and yet he cannot play Borislav, right? I mean, in any tournament, we know that two players cannot play against each other 2 times. That's true. But the thing is that there is a rule in the programs, in any chess programs, who pair players to play one another. And the rule is that if a player did not show up, or for whatever reason did not have the chance to actually play and lose or win or whatever against another opponent, he can play against him a second time. So practically the game with the plus minus, the bye game that Ivanov won against Nikolov, was not considered to be played. And that's why there could be the possibility for Ivanov to play Nikolov for a second time. This is really amazing. They could play for a second time in the same tournament on round 9. So I believe that the performance of International Master Nikolov was amazing in that tournament, and yet if he did not have to play 2 times against a cheater opponent so that he doesn't show up, perhaps he would have taken the first place in that tournament. Yet on the last round, with 6.5 out of 9, actually 8 if we don't count the first forfeit by Ivanov, he had to play against him, and naturally he did not show up, because that's more of a principle thing. When he didn't show up, essentially Ivanov just was assigned another win without play, and by the rule of the tournament, with 3 sequent forfeits, he was unable to take a prize, and they didn't even include him in the final ranking. So in the final ranking, there is a Kukov who takes 7, 6.5, and he was supposed to be first with 8, but because he had more than 3 games that were not played, essentially the chess masters and the people who really know what he is doing, they could actually boycott him and not allow him to take any prize. Now, for some of you, it may sound very unfair. Okay, well, this is really unfair. I mean, until you don't prove that the guy is cheating, you can't catch him. Now, this is the most common statement that I've heard by most people. They say, you gotta prove it. But you have to realize that it's not so easy. And it's not so easy not because it's not easy to catch him, but it's not easy to catch him red-handed. One first idea that was out there on that tournament and taken by the organizers were basically to strip search him. But that's not allowed. Why? Because a strip search requires a warrant, and a warrant from the high court. So basically, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of things to make a strip search, and the worst thing is that he'll be warned about a strip search. So there is no unexpected strip search. There was one in Saturn, but again he was warned about it. So it's like, imagine a shop that's saying, like, that's like offering, selling illegal products. So they're practically telling that store, okay, we're going to come there and we're going to revise to see what you're offering, what you're offering to your customers, what you're selling, and we're going to make this check tomorrow. So basically, you're telling him that there will be a check. So what is he going to do? I mean, nobody's so stupid. Of course, he's going to hide the illegal stuff, and of course, everything is clean. The only thing that would have happened in case of that would have been that they wouldn't have found anything again, just because he wouldn't be wearing anything. So it's becoming extremely difficult to come on the game and say, okay, we're going to strip search you. Why? Someone can do that, but that's a criminal activity. So whoever actually does that is going to break Ivanov's civil rights, and it's becoming very difficult to do that. You know, so there, it's very, very hard from a legal point to catch him, except if he doesn't, of course, pull out his phone and just click on that, which is of course very stupid to guess. So let's speak right now about some of the questions that I've gotten most often. So first, the first question that was out there is, okay, so what is the way to deal with that? Now, given the legal, the hard parts of with the legal rights that cannot be ignored, I have to say that strip search, or actually finding out where the signal comes from without an ability to approach him and really, like make him like offer his clothes and everything, it's practically useless. That even if someone gets a signal from him, as long as he does not allow a strip search to be taken and there's no warrant, I don't believe that it makes any sense, because it could be, that sort of signal could be from anywhere else. So that's basically difficult. It's impossible to catch him that way. The two solutions that I find about dealing with this kind of cheating is, first, if the organizers simply don't let him to participate in tournaments, and that's the easiest one. Now, of course, in that tournament, as I mentioned earlier, there could have been some pressure to the organizer that they let him to play, which ultimately spoiled the whole tournament. Nevertheless, the other way, just in case if he plays somewhere and it's impossible to stop him from playing, is that any of the strong players, or any player at all, just may not show up. You see, they can put that clause in their rules, in their regulations, that in case of 3 buys, which doesn't happen to any fair opponent, of any fair player, in case of 3 buys, this player just isn't qualified to get any prize or to be in the standings. And ultimately, after that, it's like the first 3 opponents, or something like that, may not show up. So we see that this player will automatically forfeit his ability to play in the tournament, just because there will make no sense that he continues playing. So there we go. And I think that this is going to be the easiest way to deal with this kind of cheaters. Just all the smart chess players and professionals who know that he's cheating can do that, and that's how you're just going to stop a way for this guy to take unfair prizes and win players in an unfair way. Players who are really prepared and ready to battle for such a high prize. Now, of course, there are other people who still believe that it's possible to strip search him, and that's why I'd like to say it's not possible. You see, there are just too many obstacles, legal obstacles, that, if there is someone who can act illegally, he will be sued. So that's exactly the reason why it's difficult to catch him red-handed. So let's talk a little bit about now his games, because I really want to say what happened and how he was cheating. While the games are loaded, I'd like to speak a little bit about how he's cheating, actually. So people said that he was using a sensor for transmitting the moves, which is possible, of course, although that makes it a little less realistic, as it's simply difficult to click all the buttons or whatever. There was a chance to suspect that there is a sensor who is transmitting the moves in a Morse code. So essentially, he's receiving them in a sort of a signal with vibration and everything. And I think that it's a lot simpler. See, in that tournament, the first Alt Capital Open, there was something very important that can help to many players to understand what's going on and what's the actual proof. There were cameras on all rounds that were looking at Ivanov, and actually they were just shooting him. And one thing that you'll notice is that he was never ever looking at these cameras. He was actually keeping his eyes down, not even looking at his opponent. And why is that? I mean, if there is a camera that is shooting you, like while you're playing a game for like 5 hours, who is not going to look at it only once? And he didn't even look at it even once. Now, that, I believe, is very significant claim, and this has been told me by the organizers who actually looked at that camera. So he didn't even look at that camera even once. And now the simple explanation about that isn't just because he hates cameras, which is crazy to say, but I mean, and also he was keeping his eyes down from his opponent, but simply because of the lens. Now, probably most of you are already aware of the fact that there are such contact lenses that are used in the poker tournaments to read cards, cards that are sort of hidden, and so that is one interesting way to cheat. But for chess, there is something a lot easier and simpler for that. Now, I was searching for a little bit, and I found out something very interesting. I believe it's called bionic contact lens, which ultimately projects certain image. It could be just one move that they project, but they project it to the one eye And essentially that is one of the easiest and simplest ways how you can be receiving moves. First of all, the lens are very difficult to spot, especially if he's not looking straight at a camera or at a human opponent. And the second thing that is going on is that the moves could be transmitted through different ways, even through certain camera that is somewhere near him, or like basically sensor who he's just transmitting a given move. There are hundreds of ways I can tell you about transmitting moves. The more interesting part is how he was receiving the moves. Transmitting move could actually happen with a camera, through someone. I believe that it's through someone who may not even be a chess player, but actually is going there and seeing what he's playing, so that he's transmitting that move to the computer operator or to the computer. But the most important is the bionic contact lens that he's using in order to see the move and ultimately find out what he should be playing. That doesn't require too much time. You see, the move is going immediately as it shows at the first line of the computer, and he's playing it quickly. Now that is, I believe, the simple way. I mean, like, here's an explanation. You see, by someone from the University of Washington, from Wikipedia. You can see, looking through a completed lens, you would see what a display is generating. And this is pretty much all that's necessary, so you can see one thing that is a lot simpler to do. Now, transmitting the move is also not that difficult, so here's one way to cheat. But in order for these lenses to be discovered, there must be a medical person, and again, there are these law issues to catch him. Now, for those of you who are listening to me, you're gonna say, okay, but Valerie, I want some real stuff now, right now. So, show me exactly what happened in those tournaments. So I'm going to show you first of all the blitz game that happened between Grandmaster Georgiev, who further on, a few weeks after, became undisputedly the Bulgaria champion for men for this year, and just a week ago he was destroyed in a blitz game by Ivanov. So let's have a look. As I always like to make some analysis, I'm going to show also something very important that many chess players don't understand, and this is, what is the difference between the computer and the master player? And our computer doesn't quite follow what a normal human being, no matter from his level, will do. So that game was a blitz game, as I mentioned. Ivanov was actually playing with the white pieces. We're going to skip through the opening stage because, I mean, for the opening, one of the amazing things that he's always playing different openings, which is simply because the way how he's cheating simply involves an opening book that he has set. And the opening book, obviously, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but for example, an opening book out there like the Deep Freeze, for instance, I've run, there are other opening books, simply provide many moves. And the computer can actually choose between any of these moves, like an opening book that he's reading real time. So the opening stage we just cut off. The opening actually finished here. And what's very interesting is to see from this point of the game how almost every move just not only fits with the computer one, but also suggests a different mechanism of thinking as opposed to the mechanism of thinking that a human person will use. Take a look. The bishop g7, white played knight c3, castles, f5. Now what you realize out there is that obviously the computer had a little more time to think than mine. Yet you're going to see that all the moves that are out there of Ivanov are actually following either the first or the second line of the engine suggestion, and that's just because I'm running it for about a few seconds. Ivanov was running it obviously for a little bit more, because even if it was a blitz game, yet the computer had a little more time to think. And obviously we don't know how much deep was his engine started. I mean, I'm using 4 CPUs right now. Nevertheless, his computer may have been using 6 or maybe a little less. It depends. So it depends on the computer mark, on the time that he was spending. Yet the important is that his moves are always what the engine suggests as most important moves. Like, for example, now we have d5 on the second suggestion, but then after all, in a moment or two, it could become the first. Or perhaps with lower computers, it could be the first one. So basically, white played d5, queen d6, and then we have rook e1, which is the actual suggestion of the computer. Then we have the move of queen e2, then rook fe8. Now if you're trying to follow what I'm showing on the board and looking at the analysis console at the bottom side of the right of the screen, you're going to find out that all these moves match. But I'd like to talk about something a little different. Okay, bishop b5 is played, then we have rook a d1, like every single one of these move matches. But then another thing is that you see, first of all, the bishop to b5 move, okay, didn't make any sense to me. And I'm going to tell you the truth. As a master player, I would never make that move. And the reason why I would never make that move is because there is a rule that suggests that whenever we have a pawn weakness, one should never exchange more pieces. And also, it doesn't make any sense to exchange that bishop on the d7. That's pretty weak, and it's actually closing black. Now, every normal person would have played rook to the d1, so that eventually, I mean, like a master player, I mean, whatever black plays, the bishop can possibly even go to d3 and line towards the queen side. Now, this is what I would perhaps do in this position. And that's one of also the suggestions of the computer. But bishop b5 is in the first place, and we realize that this is a very illogical move, especially for a blitz game, as it simply violates one of the simple laws about playing with an isolated pawn that masters know, exchanging pieces. Now, of course, for almost all these moves, there will be always some sense. So people will say, okay, but there is something else about this position. I agree with that. But you see, as an experienced blitz player, I can tell that in blitz, we don't have that much of time for thinking. So people play intuitively. What they've learned based on their experience and habits, they play it. So moves that are practically logical and based on a purely tactical evaluation don't count. Now, people don't play those kinds of moves because they don't have the time to calculate. The computer calculates it, but the human think more from a logical perspective as to what probabilities a given move can give them. It's very important to see that difference. So rook a d1 was fine. Then we have the exchange. Rook d3 also with an idea to attack on the king side. As you can see, black played also pretty nicely. And what's interesting is to see the next moves. Queen h5 is coming next as an idea to advance. And then we see a move that I don't know how anyone would actually play this move, and yet it's actually in the first choices of the computer is the move of queen d1. Now, who would get to put his queen on the back rank like that in case there is no value of the back rank, there is no d line that we can control, and there is practically no opportunity to prove that queen useful? Everybody would actually go with a move like queen f3. Now, one of my beliefs is that Ivanov is using a weaker computer than mine. My computer is one of the highest generations of processors, and ultimately it's finding the moves rather quick. While on this game, one other thing that was actually told to me by some players was that on every single move, Ivanov was taking specifically 10 seconds before he plays. 10 seconds and he was moving. It was like a clockwork. Now, who does that? Sometimes in the blitz, certainly we need to think a little bit more. Sometimes a little less. But it's never like 10 seconds, right? 10 seconds and you make a move. Now, you may say that he was actually thinking about doing it like that. Yet, I just believe that it was the time that was needed for him to transmit the move and receive the signal in his contact lens. And yet, okay, we got queen d1 in the first place of the computer, just what he played. Queen d1, and then there was rook g3. Queen doesn't do anything. I would do queen f3 if I was myself, to have the queen a little bit up. Yet queen d1 happened, and you can see that further on when the rook came on the g3, there was the queen h5. And now it's the same thing is happening, although black can't block the queen. And it's quite amazing that with this now he's winning a pawn. Would you see queen d1, queen h5 on a blitz game? I don't know. I wouldn't, because I would never choose queen to d1. See, so essentially the pawn was lost. And what's amazing is that he actually continued playing just as perfect. Later on, we see a move like queen h5. Let's say that he wanted to keep the queens in order to avoid any complication of some kind. Although you can still see that either on the first or the second place on the computer, the moves that he played were always there. First place, queen g4. What was most amazing is that later on, after the queen moved out there, and then black played queen to the d4, white played rook ge3. And practically, you see, here we have every single move with a logic based on simple tactics. See, some people may not understand that when you look at it. They'll say, Valeri, this is nice, but how can you prove that it's simple tactics? I can prove that, and any master can prove that by knowing how a player, even from a higher level player, plays in blitz. This is not a typical human play in blitz. And then essentially we see knight e4, which was quite amazing. That's another, in my opinion, proof for a typical calculation. Now, what would you do if you were with white in this position? Now, what I would do rook e4, e2 myself. You know why? Because actually I would probably calculate that the king may move on to h2. Or most likely I would play rook 3 to e2. Okay, let's put it this way. Rook e2, I think it makes more sense so that you don't give a check on the back rank. He would do that, and most likely I would take there my queen. But what we see is that the computer doesn't stabilize. It doesn't play safe in trying to keep the advantage because it knows that the calculation is bigger. Can you calculate that when you have 2 minutes on your clock? You can't. And that's why I'm saying, you see, so nobody will give away the b2 pawn. Nobody will play quite like that. And so we see that ultimately there was a calculation of the g3, the fact that black had to give away his rook, and even rook takes e7, which was a completely crazy move. I would do d6 here. I would do rook f4, anything that can keep my position still, because I know that in the blitz it could be hard. Giving away the exchange advantage for one pawn was also calculated precisely by the computer. As you can see, this is on the first move, because there is a d pawn that is passed and there are some moves with the rook. But this is more risky variation. That if you're not super tactical player who's using a computer support, you never do rook takes e7. This is exactly what happened. Even that pawn falls, but then there is d7 and promotion goes. Now, what I like to tell you, I mean, this game is not as important. What I like to show you are two other games which were very interesting. Now, here's the game against Lilov, who didn't show up twice in the latest tournament, the Old Capital, but he played with him earlier before that on the Andonov Memorial Tournament when he was practically going to be defeated. And I would like you to see, like, Nikolov was playing with black in this game. That game was restored by memory, and essentially this is very interesting because after actually just as the same game with the Georgiev, it was blitz. You'll see that after the theoretical stage of the game, okay, so we're gonna see opening book. He's playing all by theory. See, this is a man who knows everything, or not a man, an engine who knows everything because he's got an opening book in his mind. In the rook d1, we've got theory. Obviously, black deviated. The white still followed up the same theoretical conclusion. He pushed with e4, and black had an idea not to open the position, but rather to keep the position closed. A smart idea against computers, but often not an enough one. So we see that after rook c8, white advanced with e5, and then after rook to the c1, like with every single one of the upcoming moves, white's just improving his position and getting ready to win. The knight's in e3 comes, queen e2, takes, rook a2, rook a1, queen a7. Then, of course, there is the c6 to the powerful exchange that was calculated by the engine, and ultimately white is winning. Now, something really weird happened right now. It turns out that it took a little bit more time for the computer to calculate this stuff, and then, you know, at that moment of the game, Ivanov already was a little bit short in time, because you need to know that ultimately when you start a computer, let's say, even if you give him like 5 minutes, or even if you give him a little less, you see, it will always take a little bit of time to calculate certain moves that may be critical. So essentially that meant a very valuable time to Ivanov, because his time was ticking, and there was of course time for transmission and sending and operatorship play. So ultimately he was already in sort of time trouble. This was the moment when he started playing alone. Obviously the game was winning after rook takes a2. It was a pretty simple exchange. Now, even without a computer, I can surely tell you that with this move, then white just gives away a pawn, but then we realize that there is this, okay, we can attack the queen has almost nowhere to go, then we have rook a7, then we have knight a6. Now, it's amazing that with this type of computer moves, you know, white didn't play like that. I mean, there's even e6, and I mean, like, this is a calculation that I was able to make within 10 seconds after I saw this, because it's all forcing, you know, every single one of these moves is forcing. Suddenly, white plays d6 to the c. That doesn't make any sense. And this is the moment where they told me that he broke that 10 seconds per move type of sequence, and he started playing on his own, taking a little less and a little less time, obviously playing on his own. It's obvious with his next move, which was knight c4, simply throwing off one pawn that was taken, and then throwing off the rook, which was incredibly bad, because, I mean, any normal person would have taken rook takes a2, but I suppose Ivanov was already panicked because of his inability to use the computer engine for the support, and knew that he's going to lose the game, so the game finished like that. If you're still not convinced, I'd like to show you a game that was played in a very big time trouble. Like, they were having about 3 to 4 minutes on the clock. Now here we have a position that is obviously winning for black. Ivanov was playing that game against Grandmaster Drench if he also didn't show up on that tournament that was played, the later tournament. So they were in time trouble, obviously, and black is winning. So what would you play if you're playing with black over here? If I'm black, I would no doubt play just the move Rook C1. It's a simple, logical move. Catch the pawn from the back so that it doesn't move, attack it with the bishop, and take it. It doesn't take much of a strong level, so you can just see Rook C1, catch the pawn, take it, and that's it. The game is practically over. Whatever way tries, the bishop goes and wins the pawn. Even in case of Rook D3, King E5, I mean, next move, that pawn falls. It's logical and it's simple. You know what Ivanov did? Like, within 3 seconds? Now, this will be very amazing for you. He fought only 3 seconds on that move before he actually plays the move Bishop C4. Now, who would do this move in 3 seconds? Obviously, the position is winning. Everybody would take a little bit more time to think, but this move has no logical sense, as that cuts off the line of the rook, and it's risky. Now, why would someone do such kind of move? And then we realized that the tactic connected was that after C7, there's Rook F1 check, King G2, and Rook C1 that uses a very smart. Of course, you'll see that even from the beginning, the computer is suggesting Bishop C4 as one of the first moves. Later on, it will change its evaluation as being the best. But the most interesting thing is that this move doesn't allow white to queen, because if he queens, the bishop will give a discover check, and the queen falls. That's pretty much it. What's most extraordinary is that this happened in the game. Black played Rook C1 and he won. Because after Bishop C6, there is Bishop F1 check, taking, and that's the hard way to do it. Would anyone from that level, from a master level, really do such kind of move? No, because once again you see the difference. There is a pattern between the computer chess and the human chess, and it allows the human to follow more logic. You see, the computer does not have a concrete logic because it has commands, and it has evaluation, and it has calculation. That's the biggest strength of the computer. So the human cannot make that fast all the process of calculating and everything. And for many of you, this will say, okay, like you've got to understand a lot of computer engines, right? Yes, I do. I mean, as a matter of fact, I've been actually working with computers and computer engines to analyze my games, to analyze how they play against each other, the computer engines, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years, let's say. But the most important is that it's very obvious for any master level player to notice the difference. Now, see, I showed you only these examples because the other games from the Turn of a Tournament are available, and I'm going to post a link to each of them to see that each of them corresponds to the same character of playing, with the only difference of the first game that he was actually set the engine to simply exchange. And if you see his past games, you're going to see that all the games that he's drawn, except at the Plovdiv tournament, all the games he's drawn, he's made it in the same way. He starts exchanging pieces, he makes it in a perfect way, just what is the actual setting of the computer, so that it doesn't cause any further doubt. Is that enough? I think this is. But the most interesting thing that you will notice is that every game is played tactically perfect. Now, if you notice a game of this player who's actually played from the beginning till the end with a consistent, consequent plan, then you've got a point to say that maybe it's doubtful that he's cheating. But on every single game, he's winning in one and the same way. Highly tactical way, that with a complete match of the computer moves and total perfect ability. Even on blitz games, even when he had only 4 seconds to think, that's practically impossible for any man to calculate. Now, does that mean that I'm envy to him? No, I'm pitying that this type of way of winning games. But it's not about winning games. On the last tournament that he participated, I think that the purpose of his playing was quite clear. He just wanted to take the prize. It didn't work because all the professional chess players knew about what he's going to do, and they also realized that they shouldn't show up for his games in order to take away his ability to win. Because obviously, if he hasn't played 3 games, this is one more like around almost 1/4 of the tournament. So it's basically he hasn't played any games. So it's up to the professional chess players right now to prove that they don't want to play against cheaters. And I believe that the best decision is not to try and catch Ivanov, because that's not going to happen. Not with all these legal issues that have been examined by other organizers and tournaments. And just most importantly, to see that he can't win if we don't let him to. If you don't go to a tournament where he's going, if you don't sit to play a game with him, even if you go to that tournament, he's not going to be able to win. You see, because he's winning as we allow him to win. So essentially, the most important thing for the moment is to do this, to actually play against opponents who are really honest. And then ultimately, the other thing that I believe is a nice solution, and that's why I have high hopes for that, is the new FIDE committee that will be the anti-cheating committee that will be really an important step against fighting against the cheating. And most of all, I believe that they will take some important measures and come up with new rules and clauses exactly on what the cheating is, so that maybe they can ban players like that and don't let him to go to tournaments and really spoil them. As Grand International Master, Nikolov should have been first in that tournament. He lost 2 times by 2 forfeits against the same player, and instead of having 6.5 out of 7, he had 6.5 out of 9. You can see how unfair it is, because you see, players prepare for many months for such kind of tournaments. It's not just 1 month preparation. People prepare for a tournament many, many months. So it's not just a common type of cheating. That's one of the reasons why I'm so much, involved into this. It's because you're stealing people's efforts. You're going against them and what they do to prepare and play and try their best. See, this takes a lot of time and effort, and many chess players who are not that much professional, they don't play with this grandmasters and all. They cannot quite understand essentially how is it possible to say that following the computer moves and all of this is basically enough proof. But I can tell you, if we have a 99% match of the computer moves, if we have a terrible play versus 1800 players just to make sure that he sometimes plays on his own to cause less suspicion, if we have the idea about not looking at any cameras or nor either actually looking at the opponent so that he can hide his lens, and that is official, by the way, and if we have all of that plus many other factors and suspicions that were actually proved by many of the organizers, and I believe that we've got a full picture, so we know exactly what is happening. It's about the players and the organizers that should boycott and not let him to play in any of these events. And of course, we're waiting for the official committee by FIDE to be announced, so that they can take some concrete actions to prevent any similar attempts of a copycat to Ivanov in the future. Hope this makes sense, and thank you for watching again. This is FIDE Master Valeri Lilov for you on the newest cheating updates. And you can follow my website and blog so that you can get more updates on that topic and more official and interesting news that will happen in the next months. Thank you.